the Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Welcome back to the show. We've been talking about teamwork in the workplace in the last couple of shows. I'm Steven Zakash here once again with Tulio Siragusa and Ash Marr. In the past couple of episodes, we went through negative and positive personas in team dynamics at work. You might have recognized a couple areas in yourself to work on. I know we did. And hopefully you recognize a lot of the positive ones. You know, as we said, leaders, you should really try and model all of those positive personas in one way or another. And if there's a couple of areas you don't, you're weaker in, work on those. In this show, we want to dive into a playbook for peak team performance. You know, no awkward team building exercises here, just the elements to make sure your teams are healthy and functional and not one of those dysfunctional family holiday get-togethers that happen every time you've got a few select individuals that wind up on your team. I know I gave a few of you PTSD right there, so my apologies. Let's get into the playbook here for peak team performance. To start, I want to touch briefly on three key elements to team formation. That's team size, diversity, and communication. Just some quick points to consider on those. So let's start with diversity. Teams with diverse backgrounds, I think we've talked about this in the past. You know, the diversity of opinion will make better teams. Studies back that up. There's all kinds of studies on diversity. And so we're not just talking about, but we are talking about, we're not just talking about ethnic and cultural diversity, but we are talking about that. We're not just talking about age. We're not talking about gender, even neurodiversity. We're talking about all these things. The more, the better. Guys, what other kinds of diversity should be considered when you're putting together a team?
I think there's also this idea of diversity in thought and beliefs. I think those are really important. There's the value of collective intelligence, as long as it's not a herd mentality collective intelligence, where everybody just kind of like, you know, there's no real value in that. Some will say, hey, we all think alike, we move things faster, but that's not where innovation lives. So it's also diversity in thought, you know, being able to openly and safely have contrasting dialogue about things. You know, I often say, you know, you can argue to get to the truth as long as you're arguing towards getting to the truth. But I think those are important elements too that are often overlooked.
Absolutely. I think for me, my thing is diversity in professional backgrounds. I think for the longest time companies would select individuals that went through a traditional path, whether it's, you have to have a college degree. You are only going to select people who have master's degrees. Now that's completely tossed out the window. I think people really care about results a lot of times, and your background. You may have been able to acquire amazing results in different spaces and not have the traditional background in getting to those results. So having an open mind and open to diversity in different backgrounds, even if sometimes you're giving an offer or a job to someone who's an outsider from your industry, but their background might be relevant to the goals you're trying to achieve, especially with the new world that we're really living in AI and so on and so forth. So I think that's a huge one, is don't get so caught up in the tradition, maybe look deeper and see, okay, maybe this background could be valuable to us, even though it's coming from the outside.
Yeah, I think that's especially true. I could think of 1,000 cases where it just popping in my mind with what you're saying there. One of them to me was we were working on recruiting for a police force, and this is a very progressive police force. And they were not just interested in, like, you know, you've got your typical military sort of people that come into play there, but they were all, no, we want like customer service people. We want people with these different diverse backgrounds because, you know, it'll make our force, our team, you know, a lot better. And we'll have all these different perspectives in there, which, you know, in the past has just been a big problem.
Yeah.
So that's one of the most valid places to start, is making sure you've got that diverse, you know, opinion there, diverse team, diverse backgrounds. If you don't, you know, you're asking for some resentment. You're asking for all kinds of baggage. Even sometimes bringing in another part of your organization into a team, you know, maybe engineering into a team, and they may be thinking different than marketing. And so all those kind of diversity of different backgrounds and thoughts within your organization sometimes can really pay dividends for teams.
I want to add something really important to that, because you just brought up something so critical. And this is not to pick at Silicon Valley or any particular institution, but it does happen a lot where the thinking is diversity is all about different age groups and sex groups and so on and so forth. But as long as they're all from Stanford.
Exactly.
I'm not picking on Stanford, but the point is that's not true diversity, right?
Yeah.
If you stick to a pedigree type, that's actually not true diversity. So I'm glad we're bringing this up, because often that's overlooked, and it shouldn't be, because people miss out on some great innovation when they don't open themselves up that way.
So another key element on teams, and there have been a lot of studies on this, is that team size really does kind of matter here as far as how many people you've got in the mix there. So the effectiveness of communication tends to fluctuate. So there was this study that looked at between 6 to 10 members was maybe the best, but if you have more than 5 or 6 members, what they find is that the likelihood of someone speaking up drops off steeply after you hit, that kind of number. I think we've all seen this maybe in remote teams, especially, right? It's easy to get lost in the shuffle. If there's a whole bunch of people on there and, meeting after meeting, you just find yourself suddenly, hey, my role now is just being quiet here and not speaking up. So team size, guys, what are your thoughts on that aspect of team foundations?
I think as long as it's purposeful and generates more intimacy, it does make a difference. And sometimes large teams, you can have individuals that can hide out, and they end up sort of getting lost because maybe they're more shy. So I think it creates an environment where there could be a lot more discourse, and that contributes to more diversity as well. So, but in some cases you might need a bigger team. So I don't know. It's about, having, again, another cookie cutters, like we should have teams that are only 6 to 10 people, as it is, what's the appropriate size for the circumstances, and also to take into consideration the dynamics of the team. If there are some, for example, newer employees with less experience, they might do better in a smaller team with some senior people, where they're going to get a little bit more mentorship, a little bit more support, versus, an environment where you have a bunch of senior people that are very self-directed. Maybe they can get away with working with larger teams. I think every situation will dictate what the need is. But if you're proactive about being inclusive, then you can be very proactive in terms of even making sure that you're picking the right size team for the right environment.
Yeah, I don't think there's a straight answer, because to Tulio's point, there's no cookie cutter approach. It's really based on circumstance. What I found that was really interesting is that teams are cutting themselves down even further. So let's say, for example, at one point you had an organization with a massive amount of employees, and that organization gets broken down by departments. Now, what I'm finding is that these departments are growing. So in order to maintain collaboration and intimate connection, they're creating committees within the departments. So it keeps everyone engaged, and it goes down. So those committees are now a team of their own. So in terms of the right number, again, I probably could find research of things like that, but I think it's really circumstantial, right? How many people do we need to solve, a software problem versus how many people do we need within a marketing team, right? So, but I find that what's interesting is, to Tulio's point, trying to keep that connection going. And I find that some organizations are going a step further from just departments to committees within the departments and so on. So that's pretty interesting. I think that's where it comes to circumstance.
I think there's
how do we lose a connection? How do we bring the connection back?
There's a whole book on teams of teams, I think, too. But to that point on the connection, I think something for a team leader to be especially cognizant of is when you've got that voice or two in your team that you need to help them speak up a little bit sometimes. Like, make sure that they're heard, make sure that you go to this person. If they're not being heard, it could be for a variety of reasons. And, you might have some strong personalities in the group. Doesn't mean they're any smarter, any better at anything. But make sure you're aware of your team and their backgrounds, and hopefully helping them to find their voice in the team too. So especially the bigger the teams, the more you got to deal with that.
Absolutely.
And that also speaks to the culture environment. The book Team of Teams, I actually have it on my desk. It talked about how, for example, the Vietnam War was lost because it was a very command and control structure. It was not a team of team environment where teams were given a sense of agency and equivalence in terms of the ability to share power and make decisions. Not to make an example of a horrible situation like a war, but the point is that if the team members feel like they have agency, so the model is based on equivalence, then you can have the kind of dynamics that can generate peak performance. If you have a few folks who are dominant, or in some cases even bully the lesser, stronger, or I don't want to call them weaker, just less stronger individuals, then you can have very toxic dynamic on the team. So part of the challenge is in ensuring they have good diversity and good peak performance is, how is the company culture? Does it increase the people's ability to have agency by encouraging that? Does it have a shared authority, democratic approach to doing things, or is it top down, command and control? Because the culture will end up dictating how these teams operate. And you can have the most amazing, kind-hearted, empathetic individuals on a team, but if you put them inside of a culture that's kind of a toxic, command and control, jockeying for position, competing for position type of culture, those individuals, as nice as they are, they will levitate towards survival, and that will change the dynamics of that team. So it's not as simple as just let's get a bunch of diverse people together. You have to also create an environment where people feel safe and have agency, and it's based on equivalence. So you have to remove this concept of the boss, the team and the purpose of the team. The purpose becomes the boss. And that's a significant shift in thinking. And that actually really enhances diversity in a team, because people feel free to speak their mind and share their thoughts. And that's when innovation truly blossoms. And it's a difficult thing to adapt, because most companies don't operate that way. 91% of the companies out there are still traditional cookie cutter command and control, which was borrowed from the manufacturing, age, or the Industrial Revolution, right? We still operate with the business model of the Industrial Revolution, where you needed to have those control for people's safety, right? You needed to follow the rules on manufacturing something, or your arm could get cut off. So it was a safety factor. But in the world where there's knowledge working, that just doesn't work. So the dynamics have to evolve to be more inclusive, even in how much agency you give people and how much empowerment they receive.
So Tulio, with that, this really gets to our first point in our team playbook, is when you're establishing team foundations. So you're going to set up, your SMART goals, you're going to set up your objectives, that kind of thing. But when you're talking about this sort of radical team freedom, right? This radical freedom that it can be very fluid. I think the key there toward that freedom is accountability, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, hey, I'm going to give you all the freedom you need, even radically, let you guys do your thing. Here's your objective. Here's, the goals. You guys maybe, here's a budget, whatever. You guys work it out. And it's like, but make sure you hit, these key areas of accountability. And, beyond that, and obviously, according to our company purpose and the way we run things, all that comes to play there. But I think that was probably part of that Team of Teams book might have been talking about that accountability, I'm sure, too.
Yeah, right? It's a key component to it, because you're basically required to show up as an adult. You can't be a child on the team, where you have a child sort of relationship that cannot exist. So you have to show up as an adult and be self-accountable. It only works when you're self-accountable. So if someone's kind of used to wanting to hide out, do as little as possible, and being told what to do, they're going to put a kink in the chain, so to speak. Then you've got to sort of an environment where it doesn't work. The thing I have seen though, when you actually put people in an environment where they need to operate as a team and be responsible to each other, even those who historically have been waiting to be told what to do kind of step up. And so, it is required. And then if you have an environment where everyone has equal agency, then you hold each other accountable too. And I always equate it to this idea that the best teams operate like a friendship. So a true friend is going to do three things. They're going to celebrate your success with you. They're not going to be jealous of you. They're going to support you when you're down. They're going to have a lot of empathy and compassion. And they're not going to sell you out when you're going off track. They're going to call you out, right? That's what a true friend does. So if you have an environment where there's intimacy, there's agency, there's equivalence, and there's self-accountability and accountability to each other, you're going to operate under that model, which means if someone's fallen off track, you get to call them out as a team. And I remember in one company, we had this saying, no one here can fire you, but anyone can fire you. Meaning there wasn't one boss who could decide by themselves to fire somebody. But a team could collectively get together and say, hey, you're not pulling your weight. Let's talk about this. And in a very democratic process, could actually get together and do a committee and discuss what's going on and give that person an opportunity to get back into the fold, so to speak. And as a team, they could decide to let someone go from their team. And then there were other teams that had an opportunity to pick that person up, or depending on the review of their peers, might decide, no, we're not going to pick them up. Because it was also sometimes that person would have been better off somewhere else. So it wasn't a rush to just fire someone because they weren't somehow pulling their weight. It was to understand, is it the dynamics that they're in that's not working for them? Or is this something that they need correction? And it was very loving, and it took a while. It wasn't like a quick thing, but there wasn't any one individual that had the power to say, you're out of here, not even the CEO. And so that was created a lot of safety, right? But it also created a sense of like, I'm accountable to everybody here. I can't hide out, because if I do, I'll be called out. And so it does create a sense of responsibility within that team environment. You don't need to have a boss that keeps you accountable. The team works to keep each other accountable. And it's a beautiful thing to watch it in play, because it's true intimacy that happens that way. And friendship, that evolved from that too. And trust, tremendous trust.
Yeah, I think that's the way you want it. Like you said, is that team, holding each other accountable. And if there's a problem, then you deal with that problem and you make sure you deal with it, because otherwise, you're going to have those resentment issues and whatnot. But like you said, it may not be that this person is, particularly flawed in their work in some way. They just maybe aren't good in this particular team environment or this leadership position or whatever it is. I think Whole Foods had with their teams, there was an opportunity where you could kind of step into a leadership role, but then, you might not quite pan out, and you could kind of still flow back into a different role where it's not like you're getting fired, so I know there's companies like right now, I've got a friend who's like been in this one position for years, and he's had opportunities to go up the ladder a little bit. He's like, nope, as soon as I go up, I'm in crosshairs. And
it's funny. It's a terrible thing. It's like you climb up the ladder, but you can only go up or you go off the ladder. Well, maybe you realize this wasn't for me. I want to go back down the ladder. And organizations that don't have that model, you're kind of doing it yourself a disjustice.
Yeah.
I think there's a huge value too in something brought up in terms of friendship in the workplace. There's a stat where they say that people spend around 81,800 and something hours at work. That's about 11 years of your life. And building friendships in the workplace is something that most companies don't really talk about too much. I think from going back in the day, you're not allowed to have friends at work, right? Anything that that was one of those things where it's like, if you're talking and enjoying your experience at the workplace, you're not doing your job. And I think people still have access to that antiquated perception of reality when there's stats by Gallup that show that there are teams that actually have friendships in the workplace where they do hold each other accountable because they care about each other, right? Those are the engaged teams we were talking about that have the 4 to 6 time revenue returns, right? Because they're super engaged. But no one talks about that friendship element. Because in my head, I'm thinking to myself, how do you keep people accountable when you're giving them full autonomy to manage their time? I've had TAs within my coding boot camp tell me, oh yeah, I tried working for myself or working in a remote environment where I had to keep myself accountable, and I had terrible accountability. So I worked for a job where someone had to tell me what to do, and this is just how I function. I'm curious though, if it's an environment where everyone's friendly, where they can have these honest conversations. There are certain people that need to be told what to do in handheld. They might not be able to grow in the ladder, but for whatever reason, that might be where they're satisfied in life, where they feel most fulfilled at work. Right. I guess being able to determine those things. I know I'm throwing a lot out there, but one, friendship, but two, those individuals that keep themselves accountable. Is friendship in the workplace a solution to that? And then when you're around your friends, I think you're able to easily communicate, hey guys, I'm not good at being a leader. I'm good at just doing the job, and then being able to have that free communication. So I'm going up based on the assumption if stats show there's revenue and tons with engaged teams and friendship is attached to that, could also that communication start to spark, where now people are openly communicating where they probably would be best positioned. Or if it's a boss who catches someone who's struggling, maybe be able to have that open communication without them getting offended because they see them as a friend. I just wanted to add that in there. I think there's a huge importance, and it's totally forgotten really, that the friendship, the workplace element could really solve a lot of those problems.
So Ash, you're mentioning a lot in that, and this is our second point of this sort of playbook, is communication and enhancing the communication in some way. So, I mean, you've brought up a lot of good points there. I think you definitely want to have a situation where you've got the tools to communicate, obviously, right? You've got a lot of remote teams out there, so you need Slacks, you need face-to-face meetings, kind of like this would be, in a Zoom meeting or something like that. So you've got to make sure you've got all these tools in there, but you've also got to have the skills to kind of navigate that, right? Be a good active listener, encourage your teammates. That's a form of communication, is just being very encouraging, because you keep, if you're the opposite of that, then communication shuts down, right?
Yeah.
So enhancing communication is key. If you're a leader, having candor is really kind of a key element of that too. Being able to have feedback with the aim of helping. It's super critical just to be that feedback is, readily available, and you've got feedback loops going, and no one's going to get shut down for bringing some sort of, negative opinion about something in there. It's just the way you function. So, enhancing communications in some way, in all these different ways, that's really key, especially probably in the remote environment too.
And giving each other feedback is so important in this kind of scenario. Even a leader can create psychological safety by being the first to show up powerfully vulnerable. And so, a lot of companies will either shy away from this idea of friendship, but they'll embrace this idea of family, which is worse, because family is based on either patriarchal principles, which means there's children and there's parents. That's not exactly going to, equate to equivalence or shared authority or teamwork or agency. So that's actually the worst thing that could happen in an organization. But in a model where a leader understands their role, which is to serve the needs of the team, and part of serving the needs of the team is creating psychological safety. Be the first one to admit when you messed up.
So Tulio, this is our third key element to the playbook, is that psychological safety, right? This is probably, I don't know, maybe the most important one.
100%. I think it's the biggest, most important job of a leader is create an environment where people feel safe to just speak their mind, open themselves up, and discuss things openly. So if you're the first one to admit when something's going wrong and ask for help, guess what happens? You create an environment. It's like, oh, I can make a mistake and it's okay as long as I'm willing to own up to it or ask for help to fix it. Yeah. And then as a team, there's this natural desire to help someone who asks for help. I mean, it's kind of a human desire. When I genuinely, authentically am sort of bearing my heart and say, I messed up here, guys, can you help me? There's this natural desire to want to help someone who's so beautifully vulnerable that you can't help yourself but want to help them. And then you have a team that operates this way, and just helps each other. And it's this idea we're doing it in our company with blissing the OKRs. We use OKRs to manage our quarterly goals, but we're blissing them in a sense. This idea of building love into a scalable system, where any team member can step up to do something that they're not comfortable doing, and no one's going to judge them if it's not going 100% correctly. In fact, we're there to support them. And those meetings are done by individuals on the team that have never done this before, right? So they're getting a chance to be a leader in that moment and lead the whole team doing a stand-up conversation. And then they get applauded by the team or they get some feedback. But it's just a beautiful thing to create that kind of psychological safety where you're not just paying lip service to it, you're living it. And people thrive in that environment. I know I did when I was in an environment where I was the chief strategy officer, and then we acquired a bunch of companies, and all the various CEOs like, we need someone who's going to bring us all together, and we're going to vote for Tully to be the CMO. And I was like, okay, I'll go do the job and I'll bring it all together. And did in about a year. It took a little over a year to do that. And it was a tremendous effort, great learning experience too. But in the end, I was like, yeah, I kind of missed the job I was doing, and they needed someone to continue to be the global CMO. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go back to the job I was doing, go hire someone from the outside to do that job. And I could do that. And it was great that I could do that, right? Because we had the kind of friendship model where we can openly say, I don't want to do this job beyond this post-integration work, right? So to be able to do, and the company, I think, benefited from that, and I did too. So, it's always nice to be able to have that environment. And it's so important. Vulnerability is probably the biggest skill a leader can learn to practice. And it's contrary to the belief that you have to be strong and don't let them see you sweat or they're going to step all over you. That's what happens in these very toxic command and control structure where you're competing. But that's why it's all predicated on the culture, right? If you have this model that we're going to create a friendship here, then you can be safe to say, I messed up. Let's figure out how to fix this together. Such an important element to creating psychological self-safety on the team, to be vulnerable and to lead in your vulnerability as the leader of the team.
So Tulio, I'm so thankful that you just shared this with the audience. I didn't even really think about it more recently in my environment that I've been practicing this. I just thought I was being vulnerable and trying to get people to, work with me and be open and be vulnerable as well, because I just thought this is the only way I can communicate and get my initiatives across. I didn't realize that psychological safety is actually a strategy that's effective for leadership. And in my head, I'm like, I'm just using higher conscious thinking and letting the universe guide me in this way. Because the results are uncanny. I'm talking about, just being vulnerable and seeing how people react, and then they open up to you and they share their darkest things that are going on in their lives and things they don't like about their job, and then things that they wish it could be a little bit better for them. And we're now repositioning people in the right place and things are happening, but that never would have happened had I not allowed myself to be vulnerable, to say, hey guys, I'm human. Whereas most people in a C-suite position or a leadership position, they do really think they have to put on a front. They have to walk with their chest up, and everyone has to be and they actually enjoy the fact that people are a little shaky around the leadership guys. It was a weird conversation. Now, I can't name for the company I'm working for now, but that was one of my first experiences. Was I walk into a room and everyone's like, whoa. And then I asked my CEO, I'm like, hey, is this normal? I'm just Ash. Just like, what? They're like, Ash, I know this is your first time in a C-suite position, but this is what it is. And I'm like, well, in my head, I'm thinking, well, I'm going to change that. I'm going to be the coolest guy in the world, right? Not realizing that I'm actually practicing a very powerful leadership trait. I'm literally humanizing myself to everyone else. Hey, I'm not any better than you. We're the same. We're all human. We all make mistakes. Let's figure it out together. So
you creating intimacy. I mean, there are countless examples of like spiritual giants, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, or other books. Mm-hmm. These were prophets, like elevated, holy individuals, right? Yeah. And you read about how badly they messed up and the mistakes that they made, and why were those written down, right? So because you learn vulnerably that you don't have to be perfect to be a leader. In fact, you can come from a completely messed up scenario and struggle all along the way, which makes you human, and
Yeah.
still be a leader. That's the whole point of some of those examples. You can still lead and be flawed.
Yeah.
And if you create a model where everybody feels like you can still get great things done and be flawed, then you work as a team to work around those flaws, right? You support each other. And so I'm happy to hear you're doing that naturally, because you're going to create a really intimate team that way. And those teams are unstoppable. You cannot stop. You cannot compete with teams that operate that way. You just simply can't.
It's beautiful. Wow.
And there's data that backs this up. And there's studies that back this up too. I think there was I don't know if Ash, if you have that data on Google's Project Aristotle, but basically I can go over it. But basically, teams with high psychological safety are more likely to admit mistakes, to partner, to take on new roles, which fosters innovation and agility within the team. So it just becomes this more fluid, safer team. You don't have, blame going around. You don't have ridicule going around. You're celebrating even, hey, we made a mistake, but you know what we learned from this? We learned this, this, and this. And it was painful. We took a couple lumps, but I think we're going to be better moving forward because of this, right? And that's about as painful as it should be right there, right? Is going through that. That's about as painful as the process should be, but you don't find that in most places. And the key, I think, there is developing that psychological safety, being vulnerable, putting yourself out there a little bit, just throwing it out there to the group and seeing what happens whenever you do that. If you haven't done that before as a leader, people usually respond pretty well. And if you're doing it as a leader, now everyone else is going to feel a little bit more comfortable, a little more connected to you.
And someone might say, well, how do we do that? And I've narrowed it down to something so simple. Give yourself a break and give each other a break.
Yep.
Stop having expectations up here. Give each other a break. You're going to mess up. You're going to have a bad day. You're going to have a bad week. There's things going on in people's personal lives. There's sick people in their family. They're going through some illness. They're going through a divorce. They're going through a move, whatever's going on with them. A lot going on. There's lives happening beyond just the work day, right? Just give each other a break. And if everybody can have that much empathy for each other and compassion for each other, then you work as a team. Hey, I'm going through this week. I can't give it my all. I'm in my head this week. I just need to get through this. Hey, I got you. I'm flying high right now this week. I could pick up some slack. Then you work as a team. And the beautiful thing of working as a team is that you can have someone who falls a little off track because of what's going on with them, and someone picks them up. There's always someone who's a little more, in a better space than the other. And you work and you synergize this. And it's that's what I'm saying. It's unstoppable when you could do that. And also give the person a break. Maybe they need a break for a week. They're not thinking right. Let them go through their stuff.
So Tulio, this transitions to our next area, which is managing conflict. I think so. You seamlessly transition. Just before we do that transition, though, one more stat. Teams with high psychological safety are 12% more likely to report taking on profitable risks and will exhibit higher levels of engagement. So again, for you bottom line people out there, the money, the return on investment, all that will back this up. All right, so managing conflict. So proactive conflict resolution. We've talked about this. You've got to take care of stuff. If you don't, you're going to have that resentment build up. So I always say make connection a goal with your teams. That'll help you with not having as much conflict because, hey, me and Ash, we're trying to connect, and we always got this connection as a goal. We want to be, brothers and in the fight, whatever we're working on, right? So we're in there shoulder to shoulder, but we've always got connection. That's our goal. We've always got each other's back. And so I think when you've got just that attitude, hey, something happens, part of the team, hey, we got to fix this. Yeah, okay, got it. Moving on, right? You're moving forward. You're not moving sideways with conflict. You all have the same goal in mind. So I think, managing conflict, there's a lot of different ways of achieving that. But team leaders, this is on you a lot of times. It's making sure you've set the table for this. People can manage it themselves and stuff, but you've got to be the one kind of setting the table for everyone to have that that right attitude and that right mind when they're approaching the teamwork.
So in this one, I agree. And I also have seen where you can create the culture where the first job is to go and address the conflict head on the way you would adult to adult, right? So encouraging that kind of conversation between the individuals that might be having the conflict. And then, of course, if it's something they can't resolve adult to adult, then bring it to a third party who can be an open eye or ear or see things removed from it and maybe give you some perspective that maybe you're not seeing, because sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you can't see it. But it goes back to this idea that ultimately, what are we striving towards? Why are we here together? What's the higher purpose of what we're doing? And there's the purpose of achieving the goals as a business, and then there's the purpose of engaging and being in relationship with each other, because that's how we enhance our lives. In fact, there's studies done that wealth is the direct correlation to how many relationships you have. You know, if you're kind of like the lone wolf in the little suck hole by yourself, those people don't do very well. So your ability to relate with the people around you and the world around you and having many more relationships, functionally good relationship, can also have an impact on your pocket. So the higher purpose is to be in relationship, to build great ties with people. That's the ultimate goal. And if we can remember that no matter what's going on, the higher purpose is that we need to be in a good relationship, in good standing with someone, be blameless with someone, then you're motivated to get through those conflicts. And realizing that perhaps both are going at the same challenge, but from a different angle. And so if you're getting into this, there might be a little bit of a lack of diversity in thinking, that you're too fixed in your way that you can't see someone else's view. So it's a challenge in terms, we're talking about diversity. It's a challenge to recognize maybe you have diversity in your heart about a few things, but this might be a blind spot for you because you're getting so caught up on passionate about how you want it, but you can't see what's going on the other side of it. So if you're focused on connection, then it's like, I want to say yes, but let's talk about how we get there together. Then you actually can build bridges together. And that, again, it goes back to the desire to be of service to one another. And really just, it's got to be like a personal mission, you know, that I want people to love me and I want to love people. And any conflict is just simply a sign that we see things differently. And all we need to do is work through that difference so that we can either come to a conclusion together or come to an agreement that we don't agree and still be respectful. And that's the key thing. But it's a desire to be in good relationship with people. I think that's the key thing to managing conflicts.
Yeah, I think I've worked with Josh on our team for, I don't know how many years, 23, 25 years. And I don't know that we've ever had an argument. It's not that we haven't had disagreed on opinions and things, but we've never had not one argument in all that time. It's just, like I said, it's not that we didn't have disagreements on things, but I think it's just, we're, like you said, Ash, we're friends too. And, so connection is a goal in that with us. So moving on, we've got about,
I just want to jump in there. It simplifies the way you do things. If you're focused on connection and deeply understand, even when you're in a conflict with someone, Tulio, you just gave me tools to deal with at times that we could be like, hey, we're not agreeing here right now, but let's work to agree, whether it's a win-win or trying to understand each other at a deeper level, because ultimately you're trying to connect with that person because clearly there's something you're not understanding. Right. So that actually just makes it easy. Now I'm not looking for leverage, or I'm looking for what is this guy saying that he's not saying. No. I'm focused on trying to connect with this person. I can understand them. So my language ends up changing and I think that person can tell, right? I've had these conversations with people where they can tell I'm really trying here, And then with those that you just can't seem to connect with, well, as Marcus Aurelius of the Roman Emperor used to say, just somebody's got to work with them and figure it out. You just got to put up with these people, accept that. But it is what it is.
I'm not surprised about you and Josh. I mean, we subscribe to a similar principle: treat others as if they're superior to you.
Yeah,
that's the ultimate empathy and respect. When you treat others as if they're superior to you, you want to show respect. So you're not going to fight or get into a thing. You want to get to resolution.
Yeah.
So it's a principle. You adapt, and it changes everything.
For sure. All right. So we've got about 10 minutes here. Let's plow through the rest of these. So we've got the next one here is leveraging team strengths and weaknesses. This is really kind of, critical for team leaders. And there are tools out there. There's like Clifton Strengths Assessment tool for teams to understand, someone's strengths and weaknesses. But, you want to identify areas where members of your teams might have weaknesses and work on either improving that or finding roles for them where their strengths can shine. And I know, Ash, we've talked about this in I think the last episode of the previous one. That's critical, and you're working on it right now, trying to figure out everyone's strengths and weaknesses. Next one we've got here is motivation and encouragement to get engagement. So setting up incentives and rewards, developing systems of recognitions and rewards that align with team goals and individual motivations. I mean, that's kind of something that's obvious, but I think the important part of that is this opportunities for regular feedback, like positive feedback. If you've got systems in place where people can provide that positive and constructive feedback, I mean, that's huge. Obviously, that's a big thing about our Bliss initiatives at work, is trying to have these systems there that provide motivation, provide encouragement, help people become more engaged. So setting up systems like that, think about them. They work. We're finding out even at home too. So let's go to the next one here. We've got on our playbook, utilizing technology and tools. We're going to talk about this a bit more in the next podcast, as we're going to jump into some tools there and AI and how that can help you. But obviously, you've got all kinds of collaboration tools out there right now, and they're only getting better, and they're only getting more sophisticated in how they can work with you and work with the different diversity, and thought on your teams. Again, we're going to get into more of that in future shows. Next one we've got is monitoring and adjusting. So hold periodic reviews of team performance against those goals you've set up earlier. Make sure you're ready to adjust strategies. So be agile. Make sure you've got processes for feedback and changing circumstances in place for the teams to be, like we talked about earlier, Tulio, to have a little bit of freedom there. The other side of the freedom is, some sort of monitoring or accountability on that. Two more here on our playbook: maintaining team health. So this is encouraging that work-life balance. So promote policies that maintain a healthy balance between work and personal life. You got to prevent that burnout. We've talked about this in the past. If there's all kinds of ways to burn out, and one of them is not encouraging that good, healthy work-life balance. And this is something that more companies are starting to do, is offering resources for, that mental and physical health aspects. This more of a holistic approach to business. And I think in the future, as consciousness evolves, that's going to be just even more ingrained in every business out there. Last one, continuous improvement. So we've talked about this a little bit. Embrace a learning culture. Encourage ongoing learning. I mean, I can't stress this enough. If you're embracing this learning culture, this is, celebrating not just your successes, but you're able to celebrate what you've learned off some mistakes in the past. Like, hey, this went sideways, but what we learned? We could do it this way, and this way, and that's going to be even better. So one step backward, 10 steps forward. when you're thinking like that. So you want to be regularly brainstorming ways to improve your processes, your products, your services. So foster an atmosphere where innovation is rewarded. It's important to challenge ourselves, confront your fears, be humble in the process, and it'll be a little less painful. All right. On the next show, we've talked about teaming up with humans here, but how about bringing AI into the team? Let's talk about mixing AI into your work life to make you and your team function better and perhaps make you feel less like a robot. Next show, we're going to talk about AI and the changing skills landscape and how that can help teams. Are company's employees prepared for these changes? Take care, everyone, and we'll see you on the next Bliss Business Podcast.